Your jump to freelance starts here. Welcome to the Jump Moment.
So you found something that you're really good at as a creative. Now what? How do you turn that into a business? How do you go beyond, I did a good thing one time, and turn it into something that you can do for multiple clients? Today on the show, I'm having a conversation with Justin Nava. Justin's jump moment is super interesting to me because it's actually more than just one jump moment. Justin and I talk through really multiple phases of his career, starting with his first jump moment and into building the agency that he's leading today. I think you'll find it to be very helpful, even if you don't have ambitions of building an agency. One of the things that jumped out to me from what Justin was talking about was the importance of having someone in your life to help you take this, I'm good at something, and turn it into something more. Justin attributes a lot of that success for him to coaching and mentorship that was really important for him as he was building in the early years. With that in mind, I want to recommend this week's resource. It is the Jump to Freelance group on Skool. This is a community that is designed to help you take your next step. It doesn't matter if you're thinking about making the jump to freelance. There are steps that you can take in your current job, in your current planning and preparation that can help set you up for success once you jump. It could be that you've already made the jump to freelance. There are tools to help get you unstuck. In the group, we also have Q&A sessions where you can ask questions, a community of people that are focused and intentionally pursuing their next step. It's so helpful to be in a community. It was critically helpful for me when I started my business after I made the jump. It's been helpful for all of the different guests that I've had conversations with. Justin is no exception. So I want to invite you to that. Go to jumptofreelance.com and you can find the information in terms of how to sign up. Now on to the conversation with Justin Nava. Justin, thank you so much for taking time to join me today and share your jump moment with us. I always love hearing what you're doing today. What does your business look like today? How are you spending your time in terms of business stuff?
Yeah, so business is good. NavaChurchMarketing.com. It's the beginning of the new year. The 2025 budget just opened up. So, of course, business is good. Every December, November, it starts to slow down and you're kind of like, man, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? But no, business is good. We just opened up a new service on the education side. We'll talk a little bit more about it later probably, but I have an agency for churches that does their marketing, gets awareness of the church. We want the church to be better known in the community. Too many people, they don't know the church, so they can't go to the church, or Google doesn't know them. And so when they Google for help, answers, and I'm not talking about just churches near me, I'm talking about Christian counseling, couples counseling, kids events this weekend, the church should show up. So that's what we really focus on. I was a partner in an education for church media course, platform, whatever. It was a long time. It was pre-2020. And it was fine, but it wasn't the stuff that I loved, because at that point I was freelancing and I came on to share my experience and also run the community. Or I should say I ended up running the community, running tech support, running content. And it was frustrating because I could see these folks that were scared to try it themselves, that were chasing silver bullets, and they would get tired of us through no fault of our own. They just thought, hey, I could flip a switch and it'd be done. And the funny thing is that they just had to pay me more money to do it for them. And it is cost prohibitive. So all that said, I didn't care too much for the education side of things. So, really focused on freelancing. I fought opening an agency for a long time, and we could talk a little bit about that as well, but finally converted into an agency in 2021, I think. Beginning of 2021 or into 2020. It was January. I don't know. And that's been great. We got a few years under our belt, lots of great case studies, prove what we know works, and just replicating that. And now this year we opened up our coaching side of it where we teach our process. So instead of you paying us boatloads of money and we go in and we implement our 700 tasks or however many it is, you pay us 3% of that. It would cost 97% off, and we give you our entire process inside. And then the other thing too is one thing that frustrated me, Matt, was there's a lot of learning communities out there. And I'm not picking on you, Matt, because you got a Skool community. I'm in it, right? I'm not picking on you specifically or anyone specifically, but I think one of the traps is, because you get the Facebook advertisements like I do, people think it's real easy to start selling courses for $27 for $7, and you buy this course and it ends up being either an upsell or something you already knew, or it's over, and I was guilty of this too. It's so overly complicated and advanced, you can't even do anything with it. Like, and it's like, okay, let's go into your Google Analytics and go into the reports tab and let's configure it. And you're like, I don't even know what Google Analytics, like we have an account. I don't know how to log into it. It's tough. It's tough. And so one of the things I decided as we launched this learning community is we're actually not going to call it a community, and we're not going to act like it's a community. We want it to be a fellowship. We want it to be people that are in the field, working the harvest, doing the work together. And I say this with love to all my construction brothers, but if you've ever worked construction, you know, they just tell you to do it and they just wait for you to screw it up. And then they tell you you did it wrong. And then they tell you how to do it. And then you screw it up again. And then they throw their tools down and they say, all right, let's go. And they go over there and they finally show you how to do it. And you're like, dude, if you just showed this, but you know, you gotta get tough like that. It's just especially true in construction. I had plenty of opportunities like that in ministry. But that said, I think a lot of places just tell you what to do and expect you to just figure it out on your own. We're going to do it a little bit more hand-holding. And sorry, I'm going on this pitch thing. It's just, I'm very excited about it. It's like telling someone about your church. You know, we focus more on workshops. Like we're actually doing work in these lessons. So you're not just learning and then, oh, turn in your homework down below. It's like, no, when you walk out, it's done. And so I'm very, very excited to open something like that. As far as I know, something like that hasn't intentionally been done. I'm sure there are plenty of communities that just do it that way. But for me, I think it's something more than just log in and good luck, follow this coursework. It's more, let's meet, let's gather, let's ask questions, and let's really lean on each other. So anyways, yeah, that's what I'm really excited about this year is opening that side up.
Well, I think what's so helpful about it is when somebody is doing their own thing, like somebody's made the jump to freelance, they're pursuing and building a business that they believe to be the most effective way to do it. It's typically a reflection of a lot of things that have gone wrong over a long period of time. So exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I bought a bunch of courses recently where I'm like, I want to really dial in social media, or I want to dial in this thing over here, this thing over here. And I realized that what I did is I paid however much money to be pitched more things. And I'm thinking, well, okay, well, that's not exactly what I thought I was buying. I was hoping I would actually get a couple solutions in here. And some of them have good information. So it's not that they're just, you know, a complete waste, but it really isn't the silver bullet that we keep chasing. And I think, especially for freelancers, we are presented silver bullets all the time. The reason that you're not making 10 figures a month is because you're not using my formula of X, Y, Z. And the reality is that, like you're saying, unless you're hiring that person to come in and actually do the sales calls for you, or, you know, like execute the infrastructure, that there's a good chance that what you're paying isn't going to yield the results. And so to me, I love hearing these things, the different things that businesses value, and even the things that you're building. I love the structure that you're approaching it with, and I think it's going to be a great thing. So yeah, no
and follow along the same thinking. I like to use the term silver bullet rather than magic pill or whatever, because Matt, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or keep it to yourself. You know, if I hand you a silver bullet, there is no guarantee that is going to hit the target.
That's right.
Because you may not have the sidearm. You may not. I'm watching. I don't know if this is going to go on YouTube if I need to watch certain words I use, but you don't have your sidearm. You don't know if it's going to fit the right caliber. Then I don't know if you know how to aim. If you even know, has anyone ever even showed you what your dominant eye is? Like, did you even know you have a dominant eye? And that's what you look down the sights with. And people are like, oh, I had no idea. And it's like, and yet some people are like, oh yeah, just buy this thing and target hit.
Yep.
Not exactly, right? Every man knows just because you got a drill doesn't mean that screw is going in the hole perfectly.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, back in the old days, that's what Photoshop was. Well, I'll just buy Photoshop and I don't need your services. I mean, okay, have fun.
Yeah. And then you look up a tutorial and you're like, what's a layer mask?
Yeah. What did I do? Yeah. Right. That's good. So I think that's a great insight kind of into where you are today, the momentum that you're building. It's interesting to me, the shift from freelance to agency. I'm curious though, before you were doing your own thing, what did life look like for you? You know, I mean, I guess not holistically life. I guess you could go there if you want, but in terms of work, you know, were you working at a place? Were you always in the freelance space? You know, what did that look like?
Yeah, no, I'll actually go back to this thing hanging on my wall here. This is a music degree because I felt called to ministry in 2000 something, junior in senior in high school, and I was good at music. I was in the band. I played in the worship band. I led the youth worship sometimes, and I was good at music. And so when I felt the call of like, hey, let's surrender my life and work for the church, everyone was like, you should do music. And I was like, cool. Well, the school I wanted to go to had a music program, actually a church music program. I went to a small Baptist college. Great school, great professors, great school of music. Loved it, every bit of it. It took me 5.5 years to get it though, because I'm not a great student. So if you ever like frustrated that you're not a good student, it's okay. Probably freelancing is going to be good for you. But by the time I got out, I was interning at my church in the youth as the youth worship leader. Eventually I built up the band. The youth band could eventually just run itself. And so it was kind of like, okay, well, Justin, take a step. Even my youth pastor was like, the kids are doing it. Justin, you don't have to lead it every week. You don't have to, just take a step back. So I did, and I started focusing a little bit more on the creative side of worship ministry. So we started doing skits, videos, a game, because it was youth, right? I would intentionally plan games or find games that were related to the lesson or whatever. And then we also did our own camps and stuff. So, that took up a large chunk of it. So I got really good at it. And eventually the pastor was like, hey, can you do some of this for the church? Started doing some of it for the church. Church was really open and receptive to it. Then in 2010, I proposed to my wife, well, my girlfriend then. And 2011, I graduated college. I was getting married the next month. I was still on an intern salary. So I told my pastor, I was like, look, I don't know how this is supposed to work because I've been here for so long. This is like, besides Subway, Pizza Hut, and a retail store I can't remember the name of because they closed down. This is the only place I've ever worked with. So I'm just letting you know, I'm getting married, obviously, I need a full-time job with a full-time salary, or I got to start looking for other places. The pastor said, okay, and we'll see what we can do, and came back, probably same day, if not a couple of days later, and said, hey, our IT guy, because we were a church and private school, our IT guy is leaving. You can have his spot. And, keep doing what you're doing on the creative arts. Just also do some media IT stuff. And I was like, great. That's when I learned IT is not the same as media. And that's when they learned that media is not the same as IT. Just because you can edit a video doesn't mean you can run a network infrastructure with educational guidelines and firewalls and mesh. At the time, mesh networks were just becoming a thing where you can go from one Wi-Fi to another without having to disconnect and reconnect. Anyway, so that was in 2011 is when I came on full-time. And that's when I got my first big full-time assignment, was redoing our church's website. So the last guy had it on a physical server in the office. It was on Microsoft front page, I think is what it was called. And no one knew how to edit it. It had people that came from a Sears catalog on it. And it just we felt like it didn't represent our church. So I was like, okay. So speaking of learning, basically I spent my first 6 months, essentially my full-time job was learning how to build a website. And it sounds harsh when I put it that way, but basically the church, my first 6 months, they paid me $18,000 salary to learn how to not build a website because I tried all different softwares. This was before, I think this was right when Squarespace was hitting the market. So Squarespace was super young. We're talking like version 1. Yeah. There was no Wix. There was no ChurchCo. There was no Subsplash. None of that. It was, we had to use secular software. And WordPress, forget about it. I took every course under the sun. I even audited a community college class, and that was a waste of time. If it wasn't $70, I would say it was a waste of money. But maybe I got $70 out of it just by knowing people. At least
for this story, it was worth it. Yeah,
for the story, yeah. And I could not. Nothing really like resonated with me. But after 6 months, we finally launched something. I want to say it was February, March. I have to go to the Wayback Machine to find out. And 3 months later, we had our quarterly new members luncheon, which if that doesn't tell you we're Baptist, I don't know what would. Okay. Every 3 months, we had a gathering where we would have the staff come to lunch with the new members that just joined, either by baptism or transfer, which we were in a military town. So a lot of them were just transfers, but we had, 8 to 12 baptisms a year, nothing that would put us on the map, but nothing that was like, oh, we're dying. If anything, we were plateaued at the moment. Anyways, launched the website. 3 months later, we have the new members luncheon. At the new members luncheon, there was 12 families that joined the church. This was more than usual. Usually it was like 5, 6, or 7. We had, I don't want to say double, but because I don't know the whole stats, but we had 12 families that week or that quarter. And one of the things that pastor does is he stands up, welcome, blah, blah, here's all the staff and all that stuff. And he said, I'll introduce yourselves to each other because you're going to be learning, you're going to be figuring out our church. You're going to be going through this process with us, learning what it looks like to serve in our church and all that stuff. Introduce yourself, what brought you to our church, and a little bit about yourself. Well, out of the 12 families, 11 of them, I wish I could say all 12, but it was all but one, whatever the percentage is, over 90% of families had mentioned the website in some shape or form as influencing their decision to visit our church when they first came to town or when they first wanted to see a church. There was, it looked like it was a safe place for our kids. It looked like this was a place to, like, I could fit in. At the time, again, 2012, online sermons were not really a thing, but we had online sermons because, again, as a military town, a lot of our members would go overseas, and it was like, hey, we could just do a podcast instead of shipping out 50 CDs every week. Yeah, great. And so a couple of them said we got to listen to the sermons online and, felt like this was a good place we could bring comfortable place we could bring our family. And so it was really encouraging that out of most families, 11 out of 12 families, really without unprompt said, yeah, we saw the website. And it maybe, now that I'm saying it, maybe it was like the first family said it and then everyone else felt like they had to say it. I don't know.
I don't believe that at all.
Maybe it was God. And so I was like, oh, this is great. This is really great. And so, and if you go to the Wayback Machine and look it up, that website sucks nowadays. But back then, it was fire, right? What do the kids say? It was wild, bro. Yeah, it had one picture on the homepage, but that was enough because it wasn't from the JCPenney catalog. So fast forward later that year, our pastor leaves in view of a call and goes to pastor another church closer to his family and doing a wonderful job there. And he calls me up and says, hey, Justin, can you do for our church what you did for Memorial, the church we were at? And I said, sure. And that was my first freelance website for $500. I was over the moon. And I think at that time we were, my wife would have been pregnant. So that was even better feeling. Yeah. So I basically built them a site just like ours, and it did really well. People were finding it. People were coming to the church. They were getting some new blood, so to speak, as I think they would say. It was really good. And as a result, in combination with the new efforts, new pastor, new vision, new efforts, new outreaches, new ministries, all that stuff, they were making a name for themselves in the community, and people would say, oh, tell me more about this Bethel place. And they would go online, they would find the church, and they would see not just information, but inspiration about the church. Like, this is why this exists. This isn't just another church. This isn't just another place. This isn't like, what you grew up with or what you see on the news. This is a place of real people in real community making a real impact, or whatever the tagline was. And so as a result, like, it came down to, they built a shopping mall across the street, and it came down to, do we name the road that they built Target Avenue or Lowe's Avenue or whatever it is, or do we name it after the church? And they actually named the road after the church because of the good work the church was doing and because they were making a positive impact. And when someone heard about the church, they could find it and they could see something that they could remember about the church. And that's how much of an impact and how much of an influence even something as simple as a website can have, because you're validating what the church is doing, what God is doing, what God and his people are doing. When people look it up, they can find it, they can see it, and they can say, that there is something going on here. So then I caught the Gary V bug and just started watching a lot of YouTube videos. Had to get my first pair of AirPods because my wife was like, we have a baby. You can't listen to Gary V now on your iPad blasting for everyone to hear. It's like, okay. So whenever the first AirPods came out, I got them. Yeah. Just started saying, hey, I did this. Here's what happened. I did it again. It happened again. So who else wants one? And from there, it kind of took off. I was very anti-agency. I wanted to stay a freelancer. It was a combination of stubbornness and not understanding, but also recognizing that I just didn't know how to run an agency. So maybe I was like, oh yeah, don't go to an agency, come to me. And the problem is that website is just one piece of the puzzle. And so over time, every church had a website. And then they had templates, and every church had the same template. And then you could get building a story brand and get professional brand advice. And so every church had good messaging on their site. Not every church, but many churches. And it became harder just to have a website. So you had to learn search engine optimization to get your website showing up first. And then from then, it's no longer organic traffic. Now you got to learn paid traffic, and your dollar goes further. And all this stuff, and eventually my T couldn't get any wider as a T-shaped individual. My specialty is still websites, but just having a website now is not enough. You need to know how to get it found. You need to know how to make it look good, how to get someone to take a next step, to make it compelling, to make it irresistible, to make it memorable. There's a lot of stuff that just I could not figure out. And it became a frustration for me because I didn't want to sell half a solution. Like you were saying, like I watched a course and it was like, they only told me to buy more stuff. And it was like, I don't want to sell someone a website and then they don't see any more people. And it's like, well, because you didn't do Google research or Google optimization. So it became one of those things where it's like, I guess I'll take the leap. And by the way, while I was freelancing, I also still had a job, still working at the church. And then we moved and I ironically took an IT job because my wife went to grad school. We became a one income family. There was no church jobs available. So I had IT experience. I worked in the IT help desk. So I kept working a full-time job. I would go to the library. I would book a library room in the morning, go to the library, make sales calls from the library room. And it was pretty cool walking in and walking out $3,000 richer or $7,000, whatever I was selling, and then fulfilling all that. And then I finally got to quit my job when my wife got hired. She graduated with her master's, got her certification, got hired, started working. And then it was, she worked at a hospital, got pretty good insurance. So then I was able to quit because that was pretty much the main reason I was working was insurance. And I guess some income. We lived pretty well. What's the word? We didn't live poor, but we used all of our money as a single income. IT help desk support, low level IT job. But we were also in a very affordable in the South Texas. It's very cheap to live down there. Anyways, so I quit my job. Well, I didn't quit my job. We left. We moved back to Houston. We did the millennial thing, moved in with my dad. Don't let anyone shame you. If you're a millennial family or if you're a young family and you're like, hey, we can't afford to live on our own. We don't want to pay rent. You got loving parents. Move in with your parents and save. The problem is when you move in with your parents and you don't save money, right? So the plan was to move in with our dad because he's got a big house. He's all by himself. We'll save up for a mortgage and we'll get a house. And I got to start doing freelancing full time, which was fine. And then 2020 hit. And that house got a lot smaller with 5 of us in there 24/7. You ain't going anywhere.
Every house got smaller. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like, you realize that all of my bad habits that my wife trained out of me after 7-8 years of marriage, those bad habits I got from him. And you ain't training them out of. So it's just fun. I don't think he'd mind me telling you the stories. My wife would go and she's like, who ate my cheese? And my dad's like, it was going to expire tomorrow. And she's like, I was going to eat it today. It's like, I know not to eat the last of anything, but my dad doesn't. He's afraid of things going bad. Anyways. So we ended up buying a house earlier than scheduled, but we still had we didn't have enough to avoid PMI. But if you don't have a full down payment, you got to pay mortgage insurance until you meet that down payment. But it was really good because the house is now almost double in value. So it was really good timing thing and God thing. And that's when it became really scary because now we had a bigger house. Wife wants to fill it with another kid. And I'm trying to work my way into a agency partnership. Brought what I knew was working to another agency, tried to do a partnership. Wife gets pregnant with child number 2. And our mentor says, hey, I don't think this partnership's going to work out. I think you two are going to, in a good way, you should exit now because this is not going to go as far as you would want it to because you have 2 different leadership styles. Not that either of you are wrong. It's just 2 different ways of running the same business. It's kind of like having 2 pastors. You don't want 2 lead pastors. They're going to butt heads. So I ended up like, okay, well, I guess I got to go back to freelancing. But the problem is that again, you can only do so much if you just do websites, if you just do SEO. I at the time, God was working in me to give me a greater vision, to see 1 million churches become the cornerstone of their community. Meaning, no more best kept secrets in town. Meaning, if someone in the neighborhood next to you loses their job and needs support, needs help, needs breast milk, formula. That was a big problem during COVID. They should know to go to the church. They shouldn't have to figure this out or go steal or thin out the formula like some people were having to do. Because I mean, even we had a baby 2022, and it was still hard to find formula during that time. Even a couple years after 2020. Again, watching my words, depending on where we are. So it was like I gotta figure out I gotta do more, because just doing websites is just a piece of the puzzle. Um, Eventually I kind of created like, okay, if I could do, what's the perfect marketing plan? What's the perfect way to get churches to go from unknown to best known, to go from out of mind to I need something, God's calling me, new season, new neighbor, whatever it is, this is the place to go to. How do we make the church memorable in their community again? And so I just literally did a mind map and just, here's everything we could possibly do. Here's everything I feel comfortable fulfilling. And then from there, it just became, all right, so now I gotta not do things. I gotta manage people who do the things. And like I said, I had some experience in churches because I built up the youth band and eventually that got to run itself. While we were serving elsewhere, I came into a one-man media department. I left with four running it if you include the sound guys. And so I knew how to run people. I didn't know how to do it in the context when there's money involved. And all of a sudden, a former partner, when I would say, hey, just hire this guy, he's $750. And he's like, bro, I ain't paying someone $700. So I can get this guy to do it for $150. I'm not paying $700. I'm like, bro, you're so cheap. You hate. And I'm sitting here like, I want to hire this guy, but I cannot afford that because I would have to. The clients that I want to serve, who are churches, don't have $30,000 brand budgets. They don't even have $30,000 annual budgets for the whole church. So that's not happening. So I was also figuring out, okay, how do I transition from me doing the work to me getting the right people, teaching them the right things while also allowing them the freedom to bring their strengths and then making a lot of mistakes along the way. So I guess you could say, Matt, I had 2 jump moments in that and kind of another one with this continuing education thing because, again, I don't want to manage the community.
Is that, every step along the way, I think for a lot of us, so we're sitting here in a job. We're thinking that freelance is the better option. We're stuck. We're trying to encounter this jump moment. And I think the reality is that there isn't a single jump moment that happens. And I think that's the thing that's been interesting even for me. So I've been doing this for just about 3 years now. And I've realized that if I were to go back and really kind of analyze the decisions that I've made over this 3-year period, I've had to reinvent myself multiple times already along the way. And so it's interesting to hear just the arc of your story, even to where you are now, because it's a really, really clear statement of you don't jump one time. That's not how it works. You don't go from I'm in a job, it's stable, presumably, and people like what I'm doing, and then all of a sudden I've made my own job and it's stable and people are just running to me. In part because I think part of what we struggle with on the I want to be freelance side is that we see that things are changing, but we don't see that our jobs are changing. So like as you're talking about the website in the very beginning, your job was to learn how to build websites. I'm thinking to myself, oh man, he's going to run into a problem because if he's good at doing websites, just looking at that little part of the story, if he does a good job, most organizations only need a website built one time. And then, of course, there's maintenance. And in a couple of years, everybody's like, this is terrible. We got to blow it up. But if that's what you're good at, you're going to run into trouble. If you're good at branding, I hope you're on staff somewhere while they need to rebrand. But I have some bad news. Once you're done rebranding that organization, you're not going to be able to use that skill anymore. So it's interesting just to see how you found something that you're good at. And in a way, it kind of was prompted to you with an unrelated IT job, websites and mesh networks, websites and network infrastructure. Like, okay, that's weird. But it's really cool to see how you identified that single thing. I mean, you're good at a lot of things, so it's not to, diminish other things, but you found that thing that you did it. These are the results that you got. And then you did it again, and then it happened again. And it's like, okay, I got to pay attention to that. So I think there's something really, really important in that, because when you find that thing that you're just good at doing, you're kind of wired to do that thing. That's usually something to pay attention to. And so then maybe that follow-up question becomes, all right, how do I continue to do this, how do I continue to pursue this thing that I'm good at? And how do I repeatedly do it? It kind of prompts that next question for me where, making that initial jump, I think, again, we ignore that there are many jumps, or maybe we just don't know yet that there are many jumps. But what was there something that prevented you, or something you had to hurdle in order to make that first jump? Or did you not feel like there was a clear jump and it was just sort of a, respond to the circumstances? How did that kind of break down? Because I feel the agency hesitation, because I think of that myself doing consulting. I think I want to be in the seat having the conversation with a church because I've been in the situation. I know the hardships and the pain that they're navigating. And so it's hard for me to accept the idea of training people and deploying them. So I get that jump moment. But what about that other jump moment? The first of the several, how was that?
Yeah, so I would describe my first jump moment. So getting the call from the former pastor, hey, can you do for our church what you did for your church? Can you do for my new church what you did for our former church? I would describe that as Daffy Duck walking off the cliff, but he keeps walking, and then he looks down, and then he does the sign, oh no, and then he falls, right? Like if he just didn't look down. If I didn't have the person in my life that introduced me to Gary Vee, I probably would have not recognized that as an opportunity to make more money doing more websites for more people. It just became, I would have just done that website, maybe done another one by word of mouth if there was one, and then just been like, okay, cool, that was a great $500. I didn't even bill them for maintenance or hosting. I was like, oh, this is the company. You just put your credit card on file and I'm done. See ya. And if I had not kind of had my world opened to everything that was out there, that was possible as an entrepreneur or a freelancer, I would have just done those sites, and I would have been that guy who was like, oh yeah, you can call Phil. He's got some plumbing experience and he'll fix your thing. And you don't got to call someone that's going to charge you $700. He'll do it for $300. I probably would have been that guy. I would have been like, oh, you don't got to pay a designer $3,000. Justin will do it for $500, and then sayonara.
Interesting.
So that was the first kind of thing, was like, oh, you mean I could do this again? And so for me, I guess, I don't know if you call it unintentional or accidental, but it really was kind of, I did it well once for myself, for my church. Then I did it for someone else, and it worked out really well. And it was like, oh, okay, well, let's try to do this again. And I'm sure at some point Facebook caught wind and I got an ad, and that's how I got not suckered into, but it was very valuable. That's how I got brought into a coaching community where I could learn, all right, now here's how you actually sell more and do more. So, and that's when I started making those library phone calls.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, it reminds me a lot of just the difference between training and not training. Like I think of this a lot. So I played baseball, and for me, there's a lot of people that have a natural ability. And what's interesting is that lower in the ranks, as you're in little league or in high school, even college, there are people that are so talented that they will beat you out just because they exist. Like that's enough. But what's fascinating is that those people have enough talent to make it to the big leagues unless they also are pairing that with disciplined training, a good diet. Sometimes they're, like I think like David Ortiz, or there's a handful of guys I think too, they're like, a little loose on that one, but still when they adhere to their diet, they do better and it's noticeable. You see that, he came back, 15 pounds lighter in the offseason. Oh, yep. Okay. He's going to be a force, at least at the beginning, But it's so interesting because I think there are a lot of creatives that are good at something, but they don't know how to put the framework around it, or the, kind of the scaffolding to formalize it, not steal the joy of it, not steal the creativity out of it, that's a fear that I know a lot of creatives that I've talked to. Like, I don't want to over systems it. No, I get it, but you're not going to hit you're going to pay your mortgage if you don't at least somewhat system it. There's got to be some framework around it. But that's super interesting that there was kind of that convergence of, you discovered that thing. You're like, yeah, it's pretty good. But then you're like, wait a minute, I read this book over here, and that's really interesting. And then, I'm in this group and I have this community now. They're going to help me actually make this repeatable. And I think that's a real key to that. That's great. Man, that's super interesting to hear kind of how all of the weaving has happened for you as you've jumped into freelance, and then kind of allowed that jump mindset to continue to be embraced. I'd love to know now, where you are. Obviously now we need to have a jump to agency podcast, I guess. But now that you're, kind of on the brink of this new era with what you're building, looking back, what would you have said to yourself, as you're considering this jump? You get the call on that first website. What you obviously moved forward with it. What would you say to yourself today, kind of knowing, or then knowing what you know today?
Double your price. Ask them for $1,000, not 500. My instinct is to say something I think I always knew, but I didn't know how to verbalize it until my agency jump. Know the result is what you're here to provide, not the product. My hairstylist, my barber, I don't pay $65 for a haircut. It's not $65, but I tip her, and that's what it ends up being. I tip her really well. She doesn't pay me I don't pay her $65 to give me a haircut. I pay her $65 to give me a low maintenance cut that I think looks the best on camera, so I look more professional than if it's a fancy cut I can't style, or if it's just a boring buzz cut or whatever. I pay her $65 because I like my hair. I like the way it looks. And other guys are losing hair. I got mine. I'm going to have this Chicano hair up forever. Well, Tyler messaged me the other day. He's like, I didn't know you're half Mexican. I'm like, okay, well, I guess you just got to be around me a little bit. It's something that I like. So it's one of the few things about me that I enjoy showing off is my hair. So anyways, I pay her a lot of money, I think, to do my hair and to do it well, because I'm not paying for a haircut. I can just go to Sport Clips and do that. I'm paying to look and feel good. When you go and buy a drill, they always say, no one wants a drill. If you're a freelancer, you've probably heard this. No one wants a drill. They want a hole in the wall. No. Who wants a hole in the wall? You want to hang a painting. Okay, well, why do you want to hang a painting? Because you want to improve the look of your house. Why? Because you want to feel good while you're in the room. Me and my wife is so much more type A than I am. And we spent 30 minutes hanging up a painting I could have done in 5. Okay. You ever, like, when I called the plumber over and I told him, I was like, you're so lazy. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, you did this in 5 minutes. It would have taken me 5 hours, man. Like, you're so lazy. He didn't get it. And I was like, just don't worry. It's a joke. Here's your $275. But it's like, to go back to it, we spent a lot of time, 30 minutes trying to get this painting just perfectly aligned up right in the middle of the room, just away from this one, perfectly top, bottom, perfectly leveled, right? Because my wife wants to enjoy the time that she spends, the few years that we have in the playroom. By the way, it's a painting in a playroom. Who cares if it's crooked? But she wants to know that it's there. It feels good. It looks good. Any pictures that are taken, it's not a distraction from Jack or whatever. Like, for her, it's not the hole in the wall. It's not the painting. It's the overall feeling she gets when she plays with our son in the playroom. And so I would look back at myself and say, hey, Justin, remember, you're not just building websites. You're creating an impression of this church on their community. You are co-authoring God's redemption story using the website, because when God's calling someone to him, they have church hurt. They haven't been a church in decades. The only time they've ever been a church is at someone else's wedding. Whatever it is, they go to the website. They need to see Jesus. They need to see faith community in action. They need to see discipleship, if you want to use that language. They need to see something that they can feel understood, but also understand what they should do next to get involved, to connect, make it easy to connect. A website is one avenue that we do that, because when someone doesn't know something and they're too afraid, too scared, too embarrassed to ask someone else, they're going to go to Pastor Google. So they're going to go online to find answers. I mean, how many times do we go to a restaurant without looking at the website first, right? When I tell my wife we're going to eat barbecue for lunch, the first thing she does is like, what sides do they have? Because she's a sides girl. And so she looks up and is like, they don't have mashed potatoes, they don't have mac and cheese, we're going to a different joint. And so it becomes a thing where it's like, okay, this is just part of our culture now, like AC, parking lots. Like, you need to have these things to have a functional local church that can grow. Now, there are some neighborhood churches that are in someone's backyard, in someone's house. That's fine. I'm not saying those are bad. I'm saying for a traditional American church, those are the things you have to have. Same thing with marketing. Like, people are like, well, marketing, isn't that businessy? So is budgeting. So is hiring and firing and W-9s for the contractors. Like, all that stuff you got to do. Okay. Same thing. If you want to have a presence in your community, if you want to be a safe haven is only safe if they know that they can go there and be safe. So it's all about raising awareness. So anyways, I would tell myself, your job is not to just build a website. You can now, especially, you can go to Squarespace and get a website for $30, right? You can go to ChurchGo and get a website. I mean, you're talking about like overcoming anxiety every day. It's like, oh, I'm asking for $3,000 and ChurchGo will do it for $300, you know. But there is something else there. That I'm not just providing a tool. I'm not just providing a software. I'm not a contractor that comes and hands you a drill and says, good luck, right? I am the guy that's going to come, hang that. At the end of the day, you want a perfect painting, but at the end of the day, you want it to be functional. You want it to not only bring the pastor joy, but bring Jesus joy, bring the community joy, and knowing that, hey, this is a place that stands out. It's unlike anything else we see on the news. It's unlike anything I ever experienced before. This is a unique place with unique gifts that has unique services and ministries for me that I can plug in and then become a part of that unique service. I think that's something really cool. So I would tell myself in short, because again, I'm thick and I'm like, I got to dumb this down for, how old was I? 26-year-old Justin? I don't know.
Okay,
23?
right.
No, that's way too young. Anyways, I would go back in time and I would tell younger, dumber Justin, don't focus on the thing. Focus on the end result. That's what it's supposed to be. And by the way, free tip for creatives. I mean, we talked about this at Barbara's conference. You're never going to get money just to get money to put a TV up. You're never going to get money just to get money to buy a Facebook ad. What is the mission of the church? That's what you need to focus on. And that's one of the things that's like, all right, I have this mission. Million churches, cornerstone of their community in America. All those churches aren't going to be, they ain't going to be mega churches. I don't want to work with mega churches. We don't even service multi-campus churches because that's a whole, I got to hire 2 more people to do that. And I don't have experience with that. My heart is for the local small church that's at 75 right now, wants to be at 150 because they have services, they have God's working and people just don't know about them. That's my heart. And then once you get to 200, 300, then you hire on someone like me, and you're like, okay, here's some money. Figure out how to do our website. So I would go back in time and I would tell myself that just focus on the thing, because there were times where I just built a website. All right, $1,000. Here's your website. I'm busy, and it didn't do. I had to go back and redo it, or the client was not happy because I didn't treat it with the care and dignity that it needed to have. So I would go back and remind myself that.
Well, and I think there's a couple of things that connect to me for that. I mean, the first is that, nobody cares about your logo. Nobody cares about your whatever.
Don't get me started on logos.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but like that's what all of us creatives are talking about. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, oh, let me see the logo. Oh, that's a cool logo you designed. Nobody cares about that in a business, from a business perspective, from a ministry perspective. I worked with a business this year. And I was rebranding for them. And it was so interesting to have the exact same conversation with a business leader that I would with a pastor. And it was none of it mattered in terms of the logo itself. It was, what does this do for us? What are we getting? How does this help us in that case as a business? How does this help us as a church? How does this help us be known? How does this help us be understood by our community and the culture around us? But the other thing, because you had said this sort of in jest, but also seriously, double your price. This is why you double your price, because you're not just selling a logo that are files. You're selling a much larger suite of problem solving. And I think that's a really important mindset shift, both for you to have made, which is why you are where you are today, because you're building an agency, as opposed to I'm just going to try to sell as many logos as I possibly can. It's a totally different mindset. And I think that's something that is a hurdle that we have to jump when it comes to making that jump to freelance, because it's really hard to survive if you just sell logos. It's just harder than if you are now a problem solver, because now it lets you be the IT guy, even though you don't have the IT experience, because the company says, I trust this person to solve my problems, so I will pay them to continue to solve my problems. And so it's a really, really great piece of advice, and I think it's a lot richer, as you kind of hear the breadth of your story. I love it. It's super fun to hear just kind of the background and the multiple jump moments that you've encountered, and I think there's so much that we can learn from it. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to share it with us. I know for me personally, it's inspiring to just watch the things that you're doing. I've learned a lot from you. I'm not a sales guy at all. And so I've learned a lot from you, even in your jokes about sales, where I'm like, oh man, I got to get a lot better about sales. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. And I appreciate that the things that you say here are the things that are embodied in your business, the way that you lead your business, the way that you care about what you care about. And I think that for me is probably the most inspirational thing about freelance. When I look at stories like yours, I can care deeply about something, and then I can take steps to actually make that happen. And that to me is super inspiring. And I see that a ton in your story. So thank you for taking the time to share that with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for letting me share. It was very raw. I don't get to practice telling my story. I think this might be the second podcast I've ever walked through my story on. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to go into this and not 7 ways to optimize your Google business profile, or here's our ultimate chat GPT prompt for Facebook ads for churches for 2025 updated.
Yep. My conversation with Justin was really encouraging for me. I hope that you enjoyed it as well. One of the things that was really profound and encouraging for me, especially in the season where I am right now in my business, there are many jumps. There isn't just one jump. That was something that I don't know if I recognized before my conversation with Justin. When you make the jump to freelance, you're making the first jump. You don't just jump to something and you're done. That's just not how it works. And so the continual effort and energy and pursuit of advancement in your career, in your positioning of your services, and in some cases, even in the services that you offer entirely, those change over time. That's been true for me, and it was really cool to see how that's been true for Justin, and will continue to be true. I hope that wherever you are on your freelance journey, whether you're considering a jump, whether you're practically planning and have a date set, or you're on the other side and you're trying to figure out, what do I do now? I hope that this was an encouraging conversation for you.
Thanks for listening to The Jump Moment. To find support for your jump to freelance, join our community at jumptofreelance.com.